All right, welcome in everybody to the Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning. 32 teams in 32 days. We're almost there, guys. We only have 2 of these recording sessions left. This is one of them. So we're getting so close. Kicking it off today with Philadelphia. Neil, gonna duck from some batteries. Got your Santa outfit ready just in case.
I was going to say, they threw snowballs at Santa, so God only knows what they're going to do to me, especially when we start talking about running back.
That's fair.
Oh, it's not gonna be good.
No. So we are recording this on August 12th. If any of the information seems out of date, that would be why. You can catch up with everything with us on August 26th for the live show. But of course, patreon.com/importantnonsense. Hop in the Discord, get all your questions answered before then, and get these episodes 2 days early. So that's the easiest, best way to go about it. And then everything we do here, as always, is for 12-team PPR. So again, if your league settings are different, adjust accordingly. And I do feel like I have to put this out there, even though I really shouldn't have to, but I will just in case, because I've gotten this feedback. This is not an NFL-based breakdown of the team. This is clearly for fantasy football purposes. So as much as we appreciate your Houston Texans offensive line feedback, we're good. We don't worry about that for fantasy football.
There are Houston Texans fans that are analyzing the line. That exists?
Apparently. They're like, the D-line is going to be great. I don't care. This means nothing to us.
Yeah, not too many points coming
will
from
say-
the offensive tackle.
Thank you to everyone who's reached out, because everyone so far, by and large, has been very positive about these, which
And
we
again, like the
appreciate.
pop-up said, if you haven't already, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Get all these videos. We appreciate it. Helps us out. But let's get into it. Philadelphia, from the top. Jalen Hurts. We were all pretty high on Jalen Hurts. I don't want to speak for you, Mike. Me and Neil were pretty high on Jalen Hurts last year. I don't
Jalen
remember
Hurts.
where you stood on him.
I mean, I was pretty. I liked him as a player, that's for sure. I drafted him in a dynasty league that we just started last year as my
Mhm.
QB2.
I feel like as a website overall, we were higher on Hurts than most. I think we had him projected like number 6 last season going into the year, just based on him getting the full workload.
Before
and
people
then-
throw batteries at you, you said projected, not ranked. It's a big
Right.
difference.
And even then,
Yep.
he did, on a points per game basis, he actually finished as QB6. So
Right.
there you go.
Boom.
But yeah, nailed it. So, of course, behind him, you've got the stash with the jean shorts. Gotta throw it out there. America's hero, Gardner Minshew. But I mean, this is the Jalen Hurts show. This is another one where, hearkening back to our episodes at the beginning of all this, it's really open and shut, right? There's no real debate or argument here about do you value Jalen Hurts. At least I don't think there is. Rankings wise, we all have him in the top 5. The ECR has him 6, and right now in ADP he's 7 because people prefer just other players. That's really all it is.
That's fine. Everyone's entitled to their wrong opinion.
Mhm.
I have Jalen Hurts in my tier 1 because he's 4 of 4 of the Konami code quarterbacks because he gets you that tasty rushing floor. If you're going to pick nits, he's not as accurate throwing the ball as I think some people would like.
And I
that
really
is an
think that's what it
annoyance.
is. It's a tier thing, like you're talking about. Like I believe the 3 of us here have him in tier 1
Mhm. Yes.
because of the rushing ability, and then everybody else has him in tier 2. And I really feel like that's the only difference.
Pretty much. I mean,
My tier 1 is just Jackson and Allen
Okay.
because I
Sure.
think that those are
Okay.
the guys that like you can see 40+ point games even from.
Mhm.
And I don't think like obviously it's possible for Hurts or Mahomes or Herbert or even like Lance based on rushing ability to be able to do that too. But we've seen Allen and Jackson do it before at the
Yeah.
highest of highs. So he is in my tier 2, but he's at the top of the tier 2 in a small group of them.
Anything else on this before we move on? Because I think it's pretty cut and dry.
No, draft Jalen Hurts with confidence. Unfortunately, the days of being able to get him at an extreme ADP value are gone. Same thing with DeAndre Swift. I'd love to go back in time to get those prices. God, that was so great. And as it relates to Gardner Minshew, you can take the man out of Jacksonville, but you can't take the Jacksonville out of the man. He is the living embodiment of Jacksonville. And if something was to happen to Hurts, we've talked about this for years, Steve. Gardner Minshew goes back to being borderline top 12 quarterback.
Yeah, he was top 12 every week he started, except when they benched him because, he wasn't winning NFL games. But we don't care about that here. Again, I will go back to my statement at the beginning of all this. We don't care about your NFL games. That means nothing to us.
And I the only thing I will say is long-term, redraft, no one cares. So, but for Dynasty, Jalen Hurts does kind of need to start winning some football games in a more meaningful way for his long-term prospects. Yeah. So I'm a little worried about that. But beyond that, I have very little in the way of concerns.
This was two different offenses last year. Once Sirianni gets it figured out as to what offense he wants to run, the first half, or weeks 1 through 7, they were 30th in rush rate in running the ball. And then the rest of the season, they were number 1 by over 5% from second place. Like, they completely switched their offensive scheme in the middle of the season. Yeah. That couldn't have helped Hurts, really.
Right.
So just let him figure out your scheme, go get an offseason, get everything under your belt. You obviously added the weapons like A.J. Brown around him. Everything sounds good out of training camp. All wheels up for Jalen Hurts.
And as you noted here, too, it is worth mentioning. During that stretch at the beginning of the year when they weren't running it at all, he was QB4 in points per game. Those last half of the season when they made that push into the playoffs, he was QB10. So he was more passing, less scrambling, but yeah.
Yeah, the running backs were running pretty frequently later in the season.
Yeah, but you also mentioned here he led all non-running backs in the NFL last season in rushes, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and runs of 10 or more yards. So
he's good at running.
Yeah, pretty impressive. Only 2 QBs since 2014 have been QB1 in points per game and had less than 500 rushing yards, and that's Mahomes and Rodgers. So, good note. I like it. Running back. All right, speaking of things I don't like, Miles Sanders. He's at the top of this depth chart for now. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Depth charts are fluid.
He's coming back off of a season with 0 touchdowns. Shocker.
Is that good?
Boy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that good?
Needs the big play to produce is an understatement. Even if having it in all caps, it's still an understatement.
I just felt like, why not just really hammer this home?
It should be written in like 36 font and all caps. Is really
4th highest percent of rushing yards in career coming from 20-plus yard runs. So 27% of his career rushing yards coming from 20-plus yards.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned that before, is every stat line for Miles Sanders is the same thing. It's like, yeah, he finished the game 16 for 88 and a touchdown, but it's because he was 15 for 20. And then all of a sudden on run 16, he breaks off a huge touchdown and it makes the whole rest of the day look better. That's Miles Sanders in a nutshell.
If you look at his box scores for a per game and everything else, and a lot of them now will show the long run, Miles Sanders has a 74, an 82, a 68, a 73, constantly.
Yes.
And if he doesn't have one of those, then you're seeing basically nothing.
Yeah. But it's boom or bust. I mean, quite literally with Miles Sanders. And he, like I said, he is still technically the lead back. He has been running mostly with the ones, but they've also been rotating in Kenny Gainwell. They also played a little bit of Boston Scott, who both of which showed more in their limited opportunities last season than Miles Sanders has shown in years. So I feel like at this point, he's not a guy that was brought in by this current head coaching staff. So it's a new regime. He's basically on his way out. I don't know how much longer he can actually hold on to this job. I've got him at 40. I mean, I'm always the lowest on Miles Sanders, but that's okay.
Mhm.
But at least you guys are closer to me than normal. 35 for Neil, 35 4 for Mike, and 26 for the ECR, 27 for Miles Sanders. People still want to believe.
He's a starting running back, at least by terminology and on the depth chart. So
Yeah,
I think
theory,
people are
starting
like,
running back,
oh,
yeah.
well, I'm getting a number one running back this late in the draft. That's crazy. Yeah, you kind of are.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be happy if he was anything but like my RB4.
It's just ugly. It's ugly the whole way around. Like we didn't even talk. We talked about a lot about his advanced level metrics, but also just layered on within that, he's one of the historically year on year. He's one of the most inefficient rushers,
Mhm.
just in general, which you don't like. You don't like it. He's not a prolific pass catcher. That's why Boston Scott is there. That's why they drafted Kenny Gainwell. And when he does get his opportunities to actually run between the tackles, he's hideously inefficient. Hence why he's been being competed against by fifth-round draft pick Kenny Gainwell, who we actually all like, by the way, as the player out of Memphis, but also career journeyman and borderline NFL player Boston Scott is just really pushing him for meaningful game action. These are not things that I want from anything even resembling a starting running back, RB1 or RB2 on my team. So I am every year we give the same advice, Steve. And what advice is that? Leave the Miles Sanders issue to someone else. Just ignore it, because you're never going to get a value on it. Because in every draft we do, if you got 12 people together, one of those 12 people is still a believer. That's about the hit rate. So let that person go do their thing, and I'll be more than happy to look at some of these other names on this list.
Yeah, if you just even look at the fact of, as we said, if he's a 20 to the 20 type runner, so he's going to be running in between the 20s only, really.
Mhm.
He doesn't seem to get much red zone work and everything along those lines. That's the reason that he didn't have any touchdowns last year, because he didn't have any of those big runs. So if he didn't have a 30-yard touchdown plus, he's not having a touchdown because Jalen Hurts is the one that actually is running the ball in for when he's get inside the 20.
Or Boston Scott had 7 touchdowns last year.
Yeah, in like 4 full games or something.
Like they clearly don't mind giving it to the running back when they get in close, but it ain't Miles Sanders who's getting the ball.
Mm-hmm. So it's just such limited upside and such a headache.
I mean, look, we keep harping on it, but here's Miles Sanders last year. How bad was his season last season for a guy you were taking in the top 20? He had less points per game than Donta Foreman, than Myles Gaskin, who got replaced by multiple people in Miami, then Michael Carter, Duke Johnson, the ghost of James White. These are all people that had better statistical seasons, and basically the same points per game gave you effectively the same production that Miles Sanders gave you for your investment. Devonta Freeman, Dontrell Hilliard, Devontae Booker, and Jordan Howard, the few games he played for this exact same team last season.
That's the slap.
The ghost of Jordan Howard too. 32-year-old Jordan Howard after on his third set of knees.
So this whole situation, I said it last year, like, again, whole new coaching staff, and then Miles Sanders is quote unquote the guy, right? But then they draft Gainwell. They signed Jordan Howard. They signed Boston Scott. You don't bring in all of this competition at running back if you believe in the running back that you already have in the room. So now coming into this season, Jordan Howard got cut mid last year. He's gone, but they brought back Boston Scott. They're giving Kenny Gainwell more run, and they're getting to a point now. It's going to be the end of his sophomore season. They have to see what he has before they start getting into his third or fourth year of the contract. He's going to get more playing time this year. Miles Sanders is going to be on his way out. I mean, to me, this is the last run for Miles Sanders. And it's another situation where if you told me that some running back injury happens somewhere and somebody offers a decent offer to Philadelphia for the idea of Miles Sanders and they take it, I wouldn't be shocked.
No, and I think you could probably get that done for about a 5th-round pick.
Yeah. They take anything for it at this point.
Again, not a real football show, a fantasy football show, but that is a real football analysis thing there.
But I will take the exact sentiment that you said already, Mike, about Miles Sanders and flip it, in that the public is saying, oh, it's, at 26, 27, I can have I starting number one running back on the roster. Well, I'm looking down here at ADP 49, and I can have the actual starting running back on this roster and get Kenny Gainwell, because he's the one that has actual upside, and it's a 13th round pick. So I can reach in the 12th round and get Kenny Gainwell, who has, I think, just as good of a shot to end up as the number one, and he's certainly going to be the pass catcher and have a significant role. They've multiple times last season and again this offseason have said they want to use him like the Nyheim Hines in this offense.
Yep.
No, that's it.
I mean, that's it.
Nobody else. I mean, we're all just good with that. All right, good.
I'm happy with it.
I think that's
what more do you want to say about Kenny Gainwell? I think we covered it pretty flatly there. He
says the guys that are in the 50s compared to me at 44.
Sure, but okay, great. Oh, hey, so Steve said we'll reach in the 12th round. We'll splash that cash on the dash for you and get a 12th round pick on Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah.
But there's not a whole lot to talk about, I don't think, because Nyheim Hines pretty much sums it up. He's going to catch some passes. He's going to get some limited actual rushes. And the other one that's not even listed here because he's not even being drafted is Boston Scott.
Yeah, I think that's the difference between us, Mike.
What?
I think that you're a little bit higher on us on Gainwell, but I believe I would bet I have Boston Scott ranked higher.
I'm pretty positive
Probably.
I have Boston Scott ranked as well. And it's and it's because if you follow my line of logic on it, I don't think Miles Sanders is going to be good. Miles Sanders probably doesn't even make it the whole way through the season.
Yeah,
Whether
I've
he's traded,
got
as Steve was
Boston
saying,
Scott at 61.
there you go. I've got him somewhere in that neighborhood too. I have to. So it's like Boston Scott is the one that if Sanders spits the bid again, well then they'll just go back to Boston Scott. They prove that they don't really have an issue doing that, and they brought him back for a reason. It's a 1-year deal for Scott. He's a Band-Aid for them for this year in case things start to go sideways. And they proved last year they have no problem giving Boston Scott red zone work. In fact, Boston Scott is currently dealing with a concussion. You want to know how he got the concussion? Doing red zone drills. That's how he did it. They're going to go back to Boston Scott because Miles Sanders is terrible. Duck from the battery. Miles Sanders is terrible. Boston Scott's going to be the one who actually takes over the Miles Sanders quote-unquote job, and Kenny Gainwell will have the Nyheim Hines role in a Sirianni offense. That's the way it's going to go. So for me, it's like I can get Boston Scott off waivers. Right. So it's like, okay, that I actually like the idea of that, and I can get Kenny Gainwell in the 12th, 13th round. Those are the things I'm actually interested in the Eagles' backfield, and I'm completely content to let someone else draft Miles Sanders, and put a put a boat anchor on their team.
All blurs
basically
together on this team. No, I'm 100% with you. And yes, Boston Scott right now is barely inside of the top 300 of ADP. He's going way undrafted. He's
the hate. I think the hate's gone too far on that.
So again, it's like you're saying, someone you can pick up off waivers or take in the very last round of your draft that should have a role on this offense in some capacity. And we saw the last half of last season. Like again, Miles Sanders was dealing with injuries, but again, when is he not? And he, when given the opportunity, Boston Scott was solid. So. Wide receiver. They made a blockbuster draft day trade that pretty much broke us on the stream.
It's a derail everything.
Acquiring AJ Brown. Gave him a massive new deal as well. He's also supposedly one of Hurts' best friends and someone he pounded the table to go out and get. Can't blame him for that. He is one of only 3 wide receivers with 1,000+ yards after the catch on less than 200 receptions since 2019. The others are Deebo Samuel and Mecole Hardman. So a running back and Mecole Hardman. And then 4th in yards per route run since 2019. Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson, and then A.J. Brown. It's a pretty solid list, right? And the numbers haven't been eye-popping from a fantasy perspective. I believe that's touchdown related. I would have to double-check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But now he's moving over here, going from Ryan Tannehill to Jalen Hurts. And this is what blows me away about this. So every year we have the same conversation around Ryan Tannehill, right? Stop undervaluing Ryan Tannehill. He's actually useful and usable. He gives you a solid floor. That's always the conversation with Ryan Tannehill. And we go, no, Tannehill sucks. I don't want Tannehill. He's overrated.
And he's old.
Love A.J. Brown. So then A.J. Brown leaves Ryan Tannehill and goes to Jalen Hurts, who everyone loves and is a darling, but oh no, it's a downgrade in QB. How can that be possible? You can't have it both ways.
I think it's the inaccuracy thing with Hurts. I think that's literally what it is. It's down to
they
that.
Love the rushing, but not the throwing.
Right. They love the rushing. They hate the throwing. And they're saying, oh, well, A.J. Brown won't get enough targets to actually matter. And even if he did, they were Jalen Hurts targets. So they'll be 50 yards over his head or out of bounds and some nonsense. I'm not falling for that. I'm actually a sucker for A.J. Brown historically, as we all know. I've been pounding the table for A.J. Brown is good at football since he came into the league. But A.J. Brown, to me, this is great. He's competing with only DeVonta Smith. And from every camp report you see, you don't want to just live and die on camp reports, but from every single camp report you see, from every beat writer, every day who's actually there, they're developing real chemistry between Hurts and Brown, and Hurts is just locked in on him. Mm-hmm. He's just locked in on him. So I think that's going to be the passing offense for the Eagles. They're going to ram it down. They're going to force feed A.J. Brown the ball. My only concern is it's related to A.J. Brown is could he actually play a 17-game NFL season?
Right.
Because that's been a little bit of an issue to this point. I wouldn't call him injury prone. It's a violent game, but
he's a violent player.
Yeah, he's a violent player, exactly. And he's not exactly the most durable cat I've ever seen in my life, body style wise. He's a little long, you know what I mean? Kind of long, lanky kind of guy. But I'm thrilled if I have A.J. Brown as my wide receiver too.
Yeah.
Love it. Love everything about it. So I'm great with it. Mike, you're even higher than we are. Like, you're definitely higher than Steve. You're higher than me even.
I just like, as you were saying, the fact that the chemistry is already showing in training camp, the fact that Jalen Hurts knows him well, has been friends with him. I know the narrative and everything else, whatever. But this is also a player that seems to be improving in Jalen Hurts in terms of his throwing ability and his accuracy. All reports are saying, we can only go off of what we're hearing. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen any football yet this year. So if Hurts is improving in his passing and A.J. Brown is a extremely talented wide receiver, like all the metrics that we said, and if you just look at the film, he's really good at football. And he can do it in such different ways, get the ball to him right away on a screen pass or something along those lines, or a slant, watch him just shoot down the field, break 2 tackles on the way, and get the touchdown. Or have a contested catch in the back of the end zone. He can do all those things perfectly fine. So I just think that he's going to be the favorite target. I think that they'll look to be more of a split offense, not quite the run heavy that they were at the end of the season. So that just means that if you're the number one target on a good offense, that's going to play a lot of bad defenses too. I mean, the NFC East doesn't exactly have the scariest of secondaries.
Right.
So I think all signs point to A.J. Brown bouncing back from an injury-riddled season last year and having a stellar season.
Again, I will go into the same thing I said at the time on the draft show. The reason I'm as low as I am. So again, Neil, you've got AJ Brown 14. Mike, you've got him 11. The ECR is 13. His ADP is 11. I've got him at 23. The tier, he could be as high as 20. And again, I said a few episodes ago, anybody in that tier, I've got it from like 20 to 32. You want to take anybody in there as high as you want inside that tier, you go right ahead. I feel like there's a lot of coin flips. The reason that AJ Brown lands in there for me, Neil, you mentioned the injury concern, but also, again, we were talking about the offense. I feel like it is a step up in QB, but at the same time, last season, points per game, he was dealing with injuries, but he finished as wide receiver 26. Wide receiver 26 when they were on an offense that threw the ball more than Philadelphia threw the ball last season, when he was the only guy other than half a season of Julio Jones.
The ghost of Julio Jones, even at that.
On the other side of him, I mean, there was really no other offensive options. And now he comes over to Philadelphia where he's got Smith on the other side of the field and he's got Dallas Goedert. There's at least two options on this team better than what he ever had to contend with in Tennessee, and they're on a more run-heavy offense. So to me, I'm a little hesitant to put him higher than the 26 where he finished last year. I've got him taking a step up to 23. And again, if you want to go as high as 20, I'm good with that. But for his current price, I will have no investment in AJ Brown this season.
More shares for me.
There you go. All yours. So that leaves DeVonta Smith. He had an up-and-down rookie season, especially after the team became the run-heaviest team in the league the second half of the year, like we've talked about a few times. He was sixth in the NFL among wide receivers in average depth of target, but he was the number one guy. Now, all of a sudden, he's the number two guy, depending on where you want to throw Dallas Goedert in that conversation. But what's the outlook for Smith this season?
He should take a step forward as a player, but it's a little scary because of all the factors that you just mentioned with the kind of wonky amount of passing that it's going to happen. So, yeah, this is a weird one for me. Feel really good about A.J. Brown, less good about DeVonta Smith. And the other component of that is he's going to be the deep threat, I say with a deliberate question at the end of it. That seems to be the way that it's coming out of camp is A.J. Brown's going to be Mr. Do-Everything. But DeVonta Smith is looking like he's going to be the guy who's going to be running down into the field with his hand up, primarily. And that could have some value, but as we know historically for fantasy, especially PPR, those type of players and those type of roles, the kind of upside is kind of capped because unless you're Tyreek Hill and you're going to score a touchdown every single week, you don't like that because you're not going to get enough targets, and it's too fluky throwing it down the field like that to really translate. So he's a player that I've very much been looking at his ranking from where I have him. And I'm getting ready to move him down, actually, in my next ranking update, just based on what we're seeing out of camp and what the reports are. It seems like that's going to be his role in the offense, and if that's actually going to be his role, then he'll be third or fourth on the team in targets, depending on whether or not one of the running backs could get in front of him. Let's go with third for the purposes of this conversation, behind Goedert. So in reality, as far as pass catchers, the ones that I would actually be recommending would be A.J. Brown and Goedert, and I'll be staying away from DeVonta Smith. By the way, don't hate the player. Think he's actually pretty talented, but he finds himself in a situation that makes it hard for me to get excited from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, I think that we would have had high hopes for him coming to this season if they didn't make the A.J. Brown trade. If he was the wide receiver one coming into the season, I would definitely he'd jump up 20 plus spots because I have him sitting there at 40, 41. So I'd put him in the early 20s probably.
Yeah.
If I was,
I would have him where I've got A.J. Brown.
Probably.
Yeah, sure.
Because I don't think that he's as good of a player as A.J. Brown. But DeVonta's still a really talented player. We saw it last season in flashes, but he's number 3 in this pecking order, and I don't think there's much question there.
Yeah.
It's going to be A.J. Brown as the king of the targets. Dallas Goedert's going to get his, and then what's left is going to go to DeVonta Smith, in my opinion, which makes it really hard to rely on too much in terms of fantasy.
Yep, I'm with you guys 100%. Last season, he led the team with 104 targets. Second best was Dallas Goedert's 76, and Goedert missed 2 games. Then you had Quez Watkins with 62, Jalen Reagor had 57, and then Kenny Gainwell with 50. So I think Gainwell is obviously still in that mix. I think Goedert still is basically around the same. I bumped him up a little bit, assuming he stays healthier this year. But basically that DeVonta Smith role, I'm projecting him out for close to the same targets and just basically giving A.J. Brown all of the other wide receiver targets and just saying everybody else is just useless and just cratering everyone.
By the way, I don't disagree because I was going to get into that. As for eagle-eyed viewers who are actually watching this and looking at the depth chart that we're displaying, is there anything else you even want to discuss? Because I think the Jalen Reagor dance is over. Zach Pascal is a guy.
Zach Pascal was solid for Indy last year and had a couple of usable streaming weeks. But yeah, I've got him projected for 31 targets this season in this offense. They just don't throw it enough.
Yeah, it's not a matter.
Mike, like you were talking about, the second half of the season when they actually got hot, went on the run to make it to the playoffs is when they were most run heavy. That could be the difference in the rankings too. Maybe I'm projecting it as they're going to end up being more run heavy and you guys are projecting more towards the front half of the season when they were willing to throw it more and let Hurts run with the ball a little bit more. But
I'm thinking
either
about
way,
a split. I'm thinking around like a 50-50.
Some kind of happy medium.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think they're going to do crazy one way or crazy the other.
I don't think they're going to be the run heaviest team in the league anymore.
Right.
That title's probably going to go to New England.
But
so
then,
it's
my greater point was last year they had 494 total pass plays. I've got him projected this season for 564, adding a full 70 pass attempts to this offense. And even with that, I've got Brown at 24, Smith at 54. They got to get in the end zone more, or they have to throw it significantly more than even I'm projecting from what they did last season. So there's a lot of ground for them to make up in this offense. Tight end, Dallas Goedert, we've mentioned a couple times. He finally found his way out of Zach Ertz's shadow. Ain't that the truth? And immediately became what we thought. He was a stud for that last half of the season. But again, still dealing with a couple of injuries here and there. Does the addition of Brown mean what does the addition of Brown mean for Goddard's role in the offense? Like we've talked about a few times here. Weeks 1 through 6, you've got here, Mike. Both Ertz and Goedert played 50+% of the snaps, and Goedert averaged 3.8 targets a game, 9.7 fantasy points a game. After Ertz was gone, Goedert played 90% of the snaps 7 times, averaged 5.7 targets, so up 2 full targets a game, and up 2 full fantasy points a game. And again, to me, Dallas Goedert, I think we're all pretty much in agreement here. He's that tier. He's definitely in the tier, if not the top of the tier, right behind the top 5 guys at tight end. He's the lead guy for me, at least, in the, okay, I'm not reaching on this, but if I can get it at a value, I'll take it.
I think I might have Schultz ahead of him in that tier slightly, but
yeah, the other guys in that mix are like Schultz and TJ
Hawkinson is the other one. Yeah.
Some might throw Freiermuth in there.
Some might. Probably no one on this show. Jason might, if he was here, the nerd. He might do it for you.
Officially, yes. Goedert is 8 in ADP, and the 2 guys ahead of him are Schultz and Hawkinson. And ironically enough, the guy behind him in ADP is Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
But there is a 2-round gap. So there's really like a break. It's, like I said, it's gotten really narrow. We talked about this before with the Dallas show, but Dalton Schultz just keeps climbing closer and closer to that top 5, and that scares the bejesus out of me. But about a round after him, you can get Hawkinson, and a round later, you can get Goedert. So to me, that's the best value of the tight end.
Well, Goddard's the one that I think we kind of, I realize there's some personnel changes and there'll be a few scheme changes, but I think that's the one that I would feel the most confident in because we've seen it before.
Yeah.
We've seen it with the current quarterback. We've seen it even last year when he was healthy. Mike, you even noted it. From week 7 to 17, Goedert played 90% of the snaps 7 times.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to change. I think he's going to play 90% of the snaps pretty much the entire season as the primary tight end, assuming that he can actually stay healthy. And I think he's going to be the number 2 target getter on this team because of what his role actually is, how he works the middle of the field, and because he can find his way open and Hurts trust him.
Yep.
So I feel pretty good about this, to be perfectly honest. He's the last of the tight ends that I look at and I'm like, okay, anything after this, we start getting into the weird warts. The weirdo, like, oh, something's wrong with this. Like,
the only issue I have, he falls into that like purgatory category for me, and it's bigger this season because for me it's if I'm going to reach on a tight end, it's going to end up being Kelsey, Andrews, Pitts at the top, whereas for their price, I think Waller's being undervalued and Kittle as well, but even being undervalued, like a 4th or 5th round pick for a guy that I think is a mid top 10 tight end is probably an overpay. And I think Goedert falls into the same category. Schultz, it's Hawkinson, it's Goedert. Like any of these guys would be solid options that I wouldn't have to stream on a weekly basis, but it's also a 7th round pick. I feel like there are good enough wide receivers or running backs still in that area that I'd rather bolster that and then take 2 dart throws on tight end later, as I've mentioned several times in this for just general draft philosophy, that I would just rather stream tight end and be okay with it than take a shot on Goedert.
I think all three of us are in agreement on that, by the way. Frankly, I'm just going to punt tight end entirely for the most part because I don't want to invest the capital on one of the top big name guys, even though that's what I would feel confident in. And the rest of it is just there's not enough difference between the mid-tier guys and then the guys all the way at the bottom, given the relative ADPs and investments and price points. It's just not.
Defense and kicker. Jake Elliott is still a kicker, and Philly still technically has a defense, but I wouldn't want either part of them.
Nope.
In
not even in the deepest of leagues. Not even in maybe in a 32-team league dynasty. Maybe then.
Yeah, the deepest.
Digging deep.
Yeah. But that's it. We're done with Philly. We made it. With only minimal talk of batteries and Gardner Minshew's jean shorts. So close. Heading to the other side of Pennsylvania. Not other side, but another part of Pennsylvania. Mike's favorite part. Tomorrow, we're talking about Pittsburgh.
Tune in for the Mike Manning solo show, folks, because Steve and I are just not even coming in. We're taking the day off.
Just don't mind the paper bag. It'll be Mike. Just don't worry. Till tomorrow, everybody. Keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!